Yeah, I'll explain why I have the mic set up here later. I wanted to do this intro with the programs that they handed out at the Detroit Opera House. Unfortunately, I left mine in my chair or under my chair, probably. And so I wanted to do the mailer that they sent me. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find it. So, new opera. Well, new-ish opera. The Central Park Five was a 2019 opera composed by Anthony Davis, who, if you only really watch the Met, or mostly just watch the Met, he did X, the Malcolm X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X, and he won a Pulitzer for The Central Park Five, a true story adaptation of systemic discrimination. This gripping opera follows the wrongful convictions of five African American and Latino teenagers in the assault of a white female jogger in Central Park. Despite racial injustice, resilience and redemption emerge as the five men fight for freedom. From the description on there. Central Park Five opera explores racial injustice, police brutality, coerced confession, sexual violence, and wrongful imprisonment. The portrayal of these real life events and the use of explicit racist language may be distressing. Viewer discretion is advised, suggested for audience of 16 and up. I think I saw a couple people that were under the age of 16, but they were also there with parents, and I'm pretty sure that they did have some talks with them. Might be one of those things where because they were persons of color, um, they probably have had those particular talks with them over the years. So, probably something that they were prepared for. Oh, since this is Detroit Opera, better get my Detroit hat out. Let's do this. Okay, I did have some notes on this. The set, they had like this two-tier set on the floor of the stage. They had like a little section where you could just run right across in front of these. I don't know if they were projector screens. It probably was something that was getting projected onto the screen. Could have also been some sort of digital screen that was on there. And then above that, you had another floor that you had mostly the white people stuff that was going on, like the DA, the detective, the police officer, um, Donald Trump, because he, for some reason, decided to inject himself into this particular story back in 1989. He actually ran a full page ad regarding the situation where he said that they should bring back the death penalty just for these guys. New York State never did. And if they had, it would have just been another stain on our country using the death penalty improperly. Way to go, Manhattan Mussolini. So yeah, the way that it was all kind of set up with even with the drop screen that they brought down, kind of reminded me of. Do you guys remember the Nose production the Met did? Kind of reminded me of that. A lot of projections, a lot of people running around in front of this giant screen that had the projections going up on it. Some walkways up top. It generally reminded me like that of that. Oh yeah, talking about Donald Trump's ad. The end of Act One, they uh, they indict the kids, and then they flash the full page ad that he put out in, I don't know if it was the Times or the Post or who knows. Well, somebody does know. I guess insert what paper it is right here. Okay. I mean, overall, the production, the set design was fine for a what I imagine is a mid-tier set design that they probably have for something like this. Like, I imagine if this was done at the Met or Lyric Opera in Chicago, maybe San Francisco, LA, the Royal Opera House, uh, La Scala, Bayreuth, you're probably getting a set design that probably complements the larger stage that you can use at those places. Detroit, it has a fairly sizable stage, but I doubt it has the same grand size that something like the Met has. Plus, the Met definitely can afford to have a more complex, detailed, more risky set design. Is risky the right? I don't know if that's the right word for it. Nuanced. They can do better than what Detroit had. Detroit had okay, but I think the Met can do better. Oh yeah, and people coming back from intermission. Oh boy, was that a was that craptastic. I feel like I need to apologize to people who return, no, people who show up to early downbeats for the Met streams. You know, there's people who will just straggle in half an hour in, 45 minutes in for a noon downbeat because they forget that it's not 1 o'clock, it's noon. So maybe I should be a little bit more nicer the next time when they do Tristan next. Actually, no, I'm not going to be nice. Show up at 12 for Tristan next year. Let's see. Line of the opera. This is not about black or white. Yes, it was. You know, I wish I could remember who actually played Sharon Salam because, yeah, again, forgot the program, and whoever it was a replacement player because, well, I don't know what happened, but it was someone who was not, who was a late replacement. So didn't have her in the program, don't have her on the website, I don't think. So apologies to her for not remembering who she was or not even having the good enough memory to bring my program home. Unfortunately, from the Harlem residents, she was the only one that stood out. Unfortunately, because the five, the way that Anthony Davis wrote it is that he generally had the five teenagers all on stage at the same time, all generally performing together as part of not necessarily an ensemble, but more as sort of a group thing. Like when they're doing the confession and they have this camcorder out there that's being projected onto the screen in the back, and they're all singing their part and they're just kind of passing off the melody from one person to the next. So unfortunately, while they do have at least one guy I do recognize, and Freddie Ballantine, I can't remember anything he did that stood out. Like this is probably the most you are just as close to an ensemble part that he has played that I've seen him in. Like he was sporting life in Porgy and Bess. He was one of the traffickers in the southwestern American Carmen. Not human traffickers. It was like running guns or something like that. And this, you'd think this would be a bigger role, or at least a more memorable role, seeing how important this moment is for the story of Black history in our country. But no, all five of them just kind of blend together. The only time anyone really stood out was it Corey? Whichever the one that was 16, I think it was Corey. When he was sent to prison because he was 16 when it happened, everyone else was 15, so they all went to juvie. He was on his own, met the guy who actually did the crime that they were all convicted of and sentenced to multiple years and served multiple years. Like that was the only time any of the five were just on their own. And I get the feeling that was a missed opportunity by Anthony. Actually, there seemed to be a couple different missed opportunities by Anthony. The score. Okay, two things about the score. One, it was originally written for like a 16-part thing. They actually did a an arrangement for the opera orchestra that was paid for by Detroit Opera. The second, it had some weird points where it just decided to have the drum. It just decided to pick up like during Matthias Reyes's confession of actually doing the uh, the act against the Central Park jogger. Like it picked a weird time to just have this upbeat, almost jazz style thing going on. It made no sense to it. This is supposed to be a. It was almost comical, and this is supposed to be a very serious moment. Another thing that bugged me about the score is that this is supposed to be in 1989. The score felt like it could have also passed for what they did with what he did with X, The Life and Times from Malcolm X. And he wrote that in the 70s. This he wrote probably when he was in his 70s. Or at least maybe completed when he was in his 70s. I'd have to double check. It's one of the things that just kind of bugs me about it because I listen to it and it feels like there's no evolution from what he did when he was in his 20s and his 30s until now. Like nothing's changed. Nothing has changed. Almost nothing has changed for him. Like if you go back and you listen to operas made by different composers, like if you go and you listen to Verdi, from his beginning with what is it, Nabucco. You listen to Nabucco, and it sounds like a certain way. There are like specific sections that are anywhere from 2 minutes to 7 minutes, where it's a very definitive song that gets performed. But then you look later on, and it seems like he's almost getting influenced by guys like Wagner, who do very much a straight line, everything is connected all the way to the end of the act sort of thing. It's not the whole thing, like La Traviata. The end of the second act, pretty much as soon as you get the part where Alfredo shows up at Flora's house and everyone goes, Alfredo, walking, si, amici. From there all the way to the last note of Act 2, when Alfredo's being challenged to a duel for his disrespect to Violetta. That's like a 15 to 20 minute span there, where the audience is just sitting along for the ride, no applause needed, no applause asked for, and you're just watching a through story being told. And you don't really get that in Nabucco. And then you go even further into the later years of what he did, all the way up to Falstaff, and it's even more connected, even though are still these smaller sections that he sort of sets up, and you can see these individual songs being set up and performed, and then they do an outro for it, and then they move on to something else. And again, it's all connected, and you get all of that in these later operas that you don't get in Nabucco, because again, you just get this evolution throughout. And really the same thing for Wagner as well. You look at something like Lohengrin. Again, it's all connected connecting threads from the downbeat of the overture all the way to the end of the act. But again, you have these very specific songs that get set up, and then you hear them and you're like, okay, this is a feature piece. And then they get to the end, and you're like, okay, that was the end of that. They're moving on and they're going to keep going. But then you get to the end with Parsifal, and it's even more connected, and it's even less obvious where your feature piece is, and it's even more connected into it, and it's more about the story and less about the individual arias and duets and chorus pieces. They're still there, they just kind of take a back seat to the story that he's trying to tell, which again shows an evolution in how Wagner would compose his operas from the very beginning with, again, Lohengrin to his last opera, which happens to be a prequel to Lohengrin. And here, I'm having a hard time finding a difference. Like, I feel like I could put some of the more incidental music from Central Park 5, put it in X, and you would have a hard time noticing there was a difference. Whereas I look at something like Terence Blanchard, who has both Fire Shut Up on My Bones and Champion that were both done at the Met, they sound like very different operas, even though they're both done in sort of a jazzy style. Champion very much leans into that jazz influence, whereas Fire Shut Up on My Bones kind of sounds more orchestral, though it does still have that jazz influence. This. And actually, another thing about Anthony Davis's scores, because between this and X, I cannot pick out a single song that I can sort of hum a little bit of. I can even recall. It all kind of blends together. In Fire Shut Up on My Bones, again, going back to the Terence Blanchard operas, I can pick out a couple of different songs. Like there's one where the one they were singing about how he's a peculiar child during the first act. In the second act, it starts off with that overture, ba-da-da-da-da, 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da. And then there's the song Charles sings at the beginning of Act 1 and then at the end of Act 3, because it's everything was a circle, or the whole opera was a flashback, and you're looping back to the beginning at the end of Act 3, where he's like, and he has a gun, and he's like, someone has to die, mother. And then Champion, you got that one song at the beginning. Again, different experience, but it's, again, opera where he's headed to New York, and he's got that big song and dance number, and a lot of percussion there. Look at that happy boy. Look at that happy boy. Like all that was a lot of cool stuff. And then there's the more melodic thing at the very end. I can't think of it right there. But then there's also that one point where it's like, my shoe, where does my shoe go? It goes where it wants to go. And you just feel bad for him because you realize he's going to forget everything that happened in that opera. And even other operas that happened within the 21st century. Dead Man Walking. He will gather us around, all around. He will gather us around. Dr. Atomic. Batter my heart, 3% God. The Hours. In 1923, Virginia Woolf was writing her novel. And then you get to the part where the 1950s. Ooh. And then the end, they're talking about the hours. Also the kids part. When are you coming home? Eurydice, for as much as a nightmare as it gives me, dun 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 dun, the wedding reception. The revolution of Steve Jobs. For just one device does it all in your hand. All you need is for one device. And I'm just thinking about Central Park 5, and it's like, what was a memorable song from this? Was there a memorable through line that I could even sing back to you? And I think the answer is no. And the only big feature arias that seemed to happen were from the district attorney, the police detective. I think it was a police detective. It's listed as the Mask, whatever that means, and Donald Trump. Yeah, the commander in Cheeto Dust was definitely a person singing arias as well as duets and trios with the other white characters. Meanwhile, the person was doing a lot of the usual Donald Trump stuff that we see now, doing this and then even doing the two-handed cup thing. Even though I don't think he would have actually done that in the mid 90s. So I talked to my parents about it afterwards and trying to untangle some thoughts in my head about it all. And one of the things I asked was, if someone was a jazz musician first and they came in writing an opera, would that possibly change their approach to composing an opera? Now, I don't know what Anthony Davis's career trajectory was before X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X, but I was trying to define what his influences was, and it said jazz, it said avant-garde, it said a few different things, but jazz was in there. But I'm wondering if maybe because he got into writing opera early and didn't explore jazz maybe the same way that Terence Blanchard did, that maybe that had an effect in how he approached writing opera compared to how Terence Blanchard approached it himself. Like, I feel like if I watch Fire Shut Up on My Bones and Champion, I feel like I'm getting something that, yeah, it's kind of biographical, but it's also got things where it feels like you're going into the character's head and you're actually exploring an ability, and there's some artistic license to it, and you're just like allowed to look beyond the facade that the character is bringing, and you're actually allowed to look deeper inside them than what you would necessarily see in like a simple biography. Meanwhile, in the Malcolm X opera, Anthony Davis, I don't know. I watched the opera and it felt like there was nothing there I couldn't have gotten from a documentary or a book, and not even the autobiography of Malcolm X book, like just some regular biographical thing. And then you look at this and it feels like it's a biographical thing with no depth to the character. He did it again. He didn't learn the first time. But Anthony, this is opera, for Christ's sake. You need to do more than make me feel the pages of a book. You need to actually bring some depth to these characters. Make me feel for them. 40 years apart and you still mess up the same exact way. You mess up the music because I can't tell the difference between two operas 40 years apart. You mess up the story by making it so bare bones that I feel like I'm reading a book instead of actually watching an on-stage drama. And man, I can't even blame you for the set design. That actually was fine. The only time I actually felt like there was some sort of depth, something being said here, was at the end. After they were not just exonerated, but also won a $40+ million lawsuit against the city of New York. And they're celebrating. And then it shows a screen of two people in Harlem. And it's just one kid running around in this park. And he runs into a cop. and the cop pulls a gun on him and goes, "Freeze!" It was the only time I felt that Anthony actually had some sort of artistic license in it. And it was a poignant one because, well, it's a cycle that we still have not figured out how to stop. And I want to go back to uh the kids that were actually at this opera because a couple of them were actually right by me. As a matter of fact, there was a father and son that was sitting close by me, and it reminded me seeing them together and seeing them talk about it while they were sitting down. It reminded me of a conversation I had with my brother about a colleague that he had, about how his colleague had to have a very specific conversation with his son that my brother did not does not have to have with his sons, and that was just basically the conversation of just how to stay alive, how to get home alive and in one piece. And as his colleague put it, it's something that he has to do just about every day just to remind him about it. Like, even though he was a very smart kid, he is a very smart, well, he's not a kid really anymore, but he was a very smart kid. It's a conversation that I'm sure a lot of black parents have to have with their black son, with their sons, with their daughters, probably. But it's just, it's one that someone of my skin tone doesn't necessarily have to have. And that's, if there's anything I'm going to take from it, it's going to be that father and son interaction watching this opera and how they were talking about it, and how by the end of it, the son actually was getting pretty into it and was actually cheering uh pretty noticeably, especially when the lawsuit settlement came up. As well, they did the curtain call. The only time I the only other time I've seen people booing characters or booing people at the curtain call would have been Porgy and Bess when the officers came out. And yeah, they did that for the DA and the detective and Orange Julius Caesar. And at the very least, I can't help but think about them and what he's going to have to go through throughout his life, and the fact that we still haven't really resolved it, this sort of thing, because it's just a cycle that just keeps on happening, and there's really no good answer to really solve the whole thing. Sorry to leave this in a bit of a bummer there. I suppose that's what you get when you go to operas like these. You just sort of think about those things in life. Okay, the opera itself in Detroit has a couple more shows. If you're in the area and you want to see it, yeah, if you want to, just know what you're getting into. If it's coming to, if you got a production of this coming to your town and you want to go see it, yeah, I mean, I don't regret paying money to go see this. I mean, it was perfectly fine. Um, I just I imagined I think I imagined something better. So if anything, I was probably personally a little bit disappointed. I would have hoped that maybe in the last 40 years, Anthony would have developed a different style than he had in his 20s and 30s. So shame on me, I guess. I don't know. Might have to watch something else like the Wakanda opera that he has. I suppose that's about as good as it's gonna get. Anyways, the reason I set this up here is I'm gonna try to do a thing where I react to some operas that are coming out on OperaVision, the free opera YouTube channel that it's Has some operas from across Europe on there for a few months before they take them off and then reset and refresh and all their stuff there. So I got one that's in the can right now. It's being edited. It's gonna hopefully come out in a few days. Hopefully come out before the Salome production for the Met. We'll see. For now, though, I will say thank you for watching and I don't know, coming to my TED talk. Uh, Again, if you liked what you saw in this video, please comment, subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. Always helps the algorithm. If you have seen this opera and you do have your own opinions on the opera, hopefully you have your own opinions on the opera. If you have different opinions on the opera that I have, do leave that in the comment section and we can talk about it and maybe compare notes. Because mm, I think this story deserved a better opera. And I kind of feel the same way about the Malcolm X opera as well. So let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Take care.